Hello and welcome to episode 285 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham.
This week, automakers in Europe are scrambling to form new alliances to avoid paying fines based on their inability to switch to electric vehicles. They're so desperate they're considering the radical approach of actually obeying the law.
Oh no! National litigation against climate change is coming to Canada. Now, if only In-N-Out burgers would come here before I get my stomach stapled, I'd be happy.
A new startup will store clean energy under the sea. Hopefully, in a pineapple. Under the sea.
All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week, Brian, more AI data centers and climate lawsuit setbacks with silver linings.
Yeah, lots to talk about this week. Massive hurricane, Hurricane Melissa, just as we record, is kind of about to hit Jamaica. And we sometimes talk about these extreme weather events because, of course, climate change makes them worse and makes them more frequent. But I'm also mentioning it because my son actually has a trip booked to Jamaica.
Oh, no.
He's supposed to leave.
My family was discussing that. My partner said, well, what do tourists do? I said, nobody goes this time of year. It's hurricane season. You would book it later. And then I thought, well, maybe it's cheaper this time of year.
I assume
you throw the dice.
That's why my son booked it. But he's supposed to leave in like 10 or 12 days from now, but I'd be very surprised if things are back to normal because of the stats that we're hearing about this hurricane. It's a Category 5. This is the strongest to hit Jamaica since record keeping began 174 years ago. This is bad. After Jamaica, it's going to hit Cuba, perhaps with diminishing strength. But the Jamaican Prime Minister said there is no infrastructure in the region that can withstand a Category 5.
I heard an interview on the radio when I was driving my family this morning about a person who had solar and battery. And they said the power had already gone out last night. It was cut during the night last night. And also read about winds hitting the mountains and being even worse. You know, winds can be like the Santa Ana winds in California. They can funnel and become amplified. And, this is a pretty big amplification of something huge and just devastating. Of course, Jamaica is largely a very poor country. And you don't always see that from the resorts, but it can be, just devastatingly poor in some areas. And for this hurricane, the climate change scientists are saying that it's the future. This is what we have now. And it already seems like it's part of our world now because these things they're going from tropical storm to Category 4 or 5 so quickly now. This is the most powerful storm in the world this year. And I hope that it will be. That'll be it. It won't get worse than that. But, there's already been some 5s in the region. I read that earlier today. And, they haven't done a lot of damage, though. But Jamaica's going to be is currently, as we record this Tuesday morning, is getting direct hit on the island. So, Brian, on positive news, my Nissan Leaf is 13 years old. It's my first electric car, and it's cherished to me. And I've been desperately trying to keep the thing running. I haven't spent any money on maintenance, which is one of the great things you could do with an electric car. But my, I had it into a certified electric shop because the Nissan Leaf dealer in Regina does not do electric cars, so I couldn't take it there.
Yeah. So
I went to another shop and had a bearing changed on the wheel, and they said, well, your tie rods and your ball joints, this is 3 years ago now, we're going. And you know what happens when that happens is if you go too long, the wheel will literally fall off or just go completely whack sideways and you're trapped on the road. And I'd read one account that said that the axle came out of the motor and then the whole Leaf he was trying to salvage the battery because he had done that. And so I didn't want to be that guy. And I was thinking, I want to make this thing last. The battery is, maybe 2/3 of what it was when I got it. And it's still very usable though, especially since my heater's not working.
Yeah.
I'm not using a lot of the range with the heat. I have my own little 300-watt heater that's defrosts the windows that I've rigged up. Anyway, I don't trust mechanics these days. Like when I took it to the shop, it ended up being $2,200 for something because I know they broke something that they weren't supposed to break. They charged me the most for it because I'd read about how doing it myself. They said, make sure you take out the ABS sensor. And no, they didn't. They said it was seized and they broke it, but that's BS.
Yeah.
So I got, my daughter is in high school still. She's in her last year of high school. And she said, well, the shop will do it. And so, yeah, it's sitting there in the shop. And I've had pictures on our Patreon page. And they did the ball joints, in first period yesterday when we took it in.
Nice.
So it was done at the end of first period. I guess the advanced shop is first and fifth period, the first and last period of the days. But they couldn't get the tie rods off because it was seized. The bolt was seized. Mm-hmm. And they broke their ratchet.
Oh, no.
Trying to get it off. So the teacher said, we'll go at it with heat and oil today and see if we get it off. I've had things like that. I've got a thing on my camper. The little thing that on water heaters that you have to take out. I still to this day can't. I had a long pipe that was, I was using leverage, which I learned about in high school, and couldn't get it unseized. Didn't want to break the whole thing, so it's just there now. It doesn't matter. But so that's happening, and hopefully we'll have it back. And it's just they're charging just for the parts, and they have got a printout that looks like a professional shop, so they're doing the whole thing. Yep. But I also found out that there's a more advanced high school in Regina that is more geared towards that sort of thing and other things, like beauty school as well, and they will actually charge a little bit of labor for things, but you could take it there. Yeah. It's called Campus Regina. We've got like 5 people in our city listening. Yeah. Most of our listeners are outside the country, let alone in the city. But you could find maybe a local high school or a training college for mechanics to do things like that. Like, people go get haircuts and dentistry at training colleges.
Well, you can take your car in and then get a makeover while they're working on it.
Sure. Just get my nails done, like feel like $1 million afterwards. So a wheel alignment was $40, which is, we just had one done for a safety inspection because they had to take something apart. Yep. And it was like $220 or something ridiculous. And it was a problem for us because they put it on a separate bill and my wife's work was reimbursing and it was just a pain in the butt. But anyway, usually you need a wheel alignment after you do the work that I'm getting done, which is why I was looking it up. Maybe I'd have to go there and get a wheel alignment. But you just email them and then they book you in and they do it. So It's an interesting option if you're short of money and you need something done. I mean, all the teachers get their winter tires put on there, and they've got a big rack of all the teachers' summer tires that are just getting put up there. You can see in the background. So, yeah. And I don't know what they're capable of doing. They're certainly not capable of electric car things that require high voltage, but I've put out an inquiry as to what else they might be able to do. My cigarette lighter's not working, the 12-volt socket. Can they do that? Can they work on the defroster that a line is missing? Yeah. What else? I got to do regular maintenance, like change the brake fluid because the brakes don't get used very much. You're supposed to put it in. So there's things that I might, further get done there.
Yeah, well, tell them that you're going to start smoking and you really need to get that cigarette lighter working.
Yeah, I wonder if the kids even call it a cigarette lighter, even in the shop. With their old school.
I guess DC outlet, you might call it. I can't remember.
Yeah, but it's based for a cigarette lighter, which is stupid. They should have come up with something new, and I guess they have. I guess it's USB-C would be the new thing. We were just talking about that before the show, that they put out at least 100 watts or something, which is, enough to power a laptop. And its cars are coming now with USB-C ports in the back and the front, and, that's all great. So we have a letter here from Paul. This is based on our last week's show when we were talking about battery storage for the grid that uses up renewables and also balances the grid, makes it more reliable. The power grids, these are things. By the way, I had 3 little blips of power on Saturday, 3 of them. Yeah. And do you know how much time that took for me to reset everything and fix everything? I'm pissed off. I'm starting to think they're doing it on purpose, because of the podcast. Why? It was a beautiful sunny day. It wasn't an air conditioning demand day. It was just a perfect, nice day. And
there's only
3 blips of power.
One thing in the house that needs to be reset, and that's our oven. Our oven has a clock on it. That's the only thing that I need to reset.
You know what? 2 of the blips didn't even knock out the clock on the microwave. That's how brief they were. But, my solar inverter had to be rebooted because of nonsense like this once, and I don't want it wrecked. And that's a scary thing to have to reset. It's a big thing for your solar panels that you have to do in a proper sequence. But yeah, some of my smart plugs said, no, I'm not going to work anymore. And all the routines I had to redo them or edit them. So anyway, this is a first world problem with James. But I couldn't remember about the big Tesla, Elon Musk promise to Australia. You had something that was a month or so, and I said it might have been 3 months. Well, Paul gets back to us and says, Musk's offer to Premier of South Australia was 100 megawatts for 100 megawatt hours in 100 days, built in 100 days, or it's free. So a little over 3 months.
Yeah.
And they did it. And even though they're across the world, far from the United States, where Tesla was headquartered and building all their mega packs and grid storage and all that. And it's called the Hornsdale Power Reserve. People who were there said Tesla's top battery and inverter people were there in the field, literally, for a change for the commissioning. And then the shocking part for me was that it was in 2017. I swore it was during the show.
Yeah.
But that we were paying so close attention to stuff back then that that's what happened. It was that many years ago now. I can't believe it.
Yeah, we started in 2020, but yeah, I'm shocked that was 2017. That's crazy.
Was built to build a large-scale battery storage system in 100 days, or it would be free, a promise he made following a Twitter exchange with Australian tech billionaire Mike Cannon-Brookes. The proposal was made in response to the state's energy crisis, which had resulted in numerous blackouts. So that's kind of cool. Now, we had Kike Duek on, which a 12-year-old climate activist, was part of a lawsuit against our government here, provincial government in Canada. And the judge has thrown out the case. You sent me the story, was in the local paper recently.
Yeah, I mean, I read it and tried to understand the reasoning, but, we know from these things that sometimes the law and the precedents that exist allow for this kind of lawsuit, and sometimes they don't. And I imagine it depends a lot on how, everything is approached. But the judge struck down the claim, but also wrote that the material importance of protecting the environment remains. So the judge seems in favor of protecting the environment, but didn't think that the law really allowed for this particular lawsuit to proceed.
And a shout out to our listener, Glenn, who brought this lawsuit, used up some of his summer time to do this, and our thoughts are with you. I wanted to talk about another story in the United States that was in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. The headline is, "The kids who sued Trump just lost big in court," or did they? A federal judge threw out their climate lawsuit against the president a few days ago, but legal experts say there was a silver lining in the judge's opinion. The judge also said that the plaintiffs had successfully argued that climate change constitutes a children's health emergency. Legal experts said that language reinforced a years-long strategy by an organization called Our Children's Trust, which we will talk about more later in the show, a public interest law firm, to put children and young people in the courtroom and on the stand to argue that government should do more to rein in global warming. So yeah, the judge dismissed the youth-led climate lawsuit against President Trump, but the ruling included key legal progress. The judge officially recognized climate change as a children's health emergency. That's a significant acknowledgement in a U.S. federal court, and legal scholars said that sets an important foundation for future climate cases, showing how to structure arguments more effectively. They found that plaintiffs successfully linked government fossil fuel policies to health risks for children, strengthening the evidentiary basis for similar suits. And the experts described the 31-page decision as groundbreaking for building legal precedent on climate and children's rights. So that's good to hear. Obviously, with Jamaica under the crosshairs and everything that's going on in the world now, it just seems weird that these, it's good. It's nice because this is not over. It's just the tip of the iceberg. This is just getting started.
Yeah, and
they are learning the way to do it.
Imagine you're 10 years old and you're looking to another 70, 80 years on this planet. You're really going to see the effects of that more than myself and James,
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes sense. Okay, from Green Tech Lead, this is about the European Union and the rules that are in place to force the automakers to make electric cars. They've been in place for years. In a baffling decision, I don't know, they must have sat down with a calculator and kind of figured out that somehow they didn't actually need to switch to electric cars, in terms of the bottom line, because they're doing it too slowly, according to the law. And, they're having to continue to pay for credits from other car makers that have extra credits. So originally, the car makers faced potential fines totaling up to 15 billion euros for exceeding their emissions limits. But in a significant regulatory shift announced in March, the European Commission allowed compliance calculations to be based on emissions across 2025 to 2027 rather than just 2025. And this concession gives the traditional automakers more breathing room to scale up their electric production and secure EV credits and realign their business strategies. So, quite simply put, they're moving too slow, but they've been given a slight reprieve, but they're going to have to continue to buy EV credits. So the existing pooling agreements, so if you're a car maker that makes lots of electric vehicles, you can end up with these extra credits that you can then sell to car makers that are not building enough electric cars. Well, these current agreements expire at the end of 2025, although a lot of them are expected to be renewed. And, these alliances are super important to help reduce the fines that all of these automakers have to pay. So Japanese automaker Mazda, or Mazda, as we say in Canada, they have joined forces with Changan Mazda Automobile. It is a 50-50 joint venture with China's Changan. That's a partnership. And Tesla also is involved in this. Mazda has been part of the pooling agreement with Tesla. Of course, Tesla has the most of these EV credits to sell. Nissan has pooled their emissions with BYD in an agreement in early October. And you may be seeing a trend here that Chinese automakers are heavily involved in this. South Korea's KG Mobility teamed up with the Chinese EV maker XPeng at the end of September, and they formed a pooling partnership for EV credits. And this collaboration demonstrates how Korean automakers are also teaming up with the Chinese on this. In January, Tesla, the largest holder of EV carbon credits, established a wide-reaching pool with Stellantis, Toyota, Ford, Leapmotor, Mazda, and Subaru. The alliance expanded further in March. Honda and Suzuki have joined. And, Tesla, obviously, lots of EV credits to go around. They're still making a ton of money off this. In January, Mercedes, Volvo, Polestar, Smart Automobile were backed by China's Geely, another Chinese EV maker. And despite the regulatory pressure, electric vehicle adoption in Europe continues to rise steadily. EVs accounted for 12% of total European light vehicle sales in 2024. I thought it was higher than that. But
that's because they counted plug-in hybrids, which are currently popular in Europe.
Right. So these are expected to rise, planning for 15% EVs in 2025 and 24% by 2027, 40% by 2030. And sort of a related story I read in Electrek this morning, Volkswagen is possibly facing some massive cash shortfalls. They have not commented on this yet, but the rumor is that they have an $11 billion cash shortfall and that they'll need $11 billion more to continue operating past 2026. So Volkswagen, massive company. They've been heading on this path for a while. They are switching to electric, but this is tricky times for all the legacy.
It's costing everybody a lot of money to invest in electric because you have to develop new vehicles and new supply chains, and it's very expensive. And they've been cowardly about it. All the North American and the European automakers have been cowardly about it. And I have sympathized with them, but this is coming to bite them in the ass. And we've talked about this for the 5.5 years of the show, that some of these people are not going to be in business in the 2030s. that it's clear that the share already of the European market by Chinese EVs is already pretty significant, and it could be really significant in a few short years or a couple of years even. That's what they plan on doing, and Germany's no different. But basically what they're doing, they have to pay millions of dollars to people who do make EVs when they don't make enough of them, and that encourages them to make EVs, and it encourages the people who are going hard on EVs to, continue because they're getting this money. They can put more development in. They can expand supercharger networks if you're Tesla, which benefits everyone now because everyone can use those charging networks on the highways and in the cities. But yeah, that's just, it's an existential threat. And we had a story that I put, this isn't confirmed because it was only from one source, but this is, Electric picked up on it the next day or a day after, that Canada is supposedly rumored, and I'm not believing this yet, but they're rumored to possibly remove tariffs on Chinese EVs. But even if they go to say what the Europeans are doing, which is, I don't know, depending on the vehicle, the brand, 18 to like 38%, something in there, which is, we are at 100% in North America. Both countries, United States and Canada, are at 100%, and that makes it almost impossible to compete. Mm-hmm. But if they went to a more reasonable one, which they, based on, how much government incentives they're getting, it would be a lot lower. But this is an existential threat to the North American automakers because we have an automotive industry in Canada and parts and all the things that support it. And it's very important in the province of Ontario, mostly, where the manufacturing takes place. And the Premier of Ontario is really pissed at Trump for the tariffs and, automakers picking up and actually leaving their plants to go to the States like Trump wanted. Yeah. Well, if that continues to happen, what are we going to do? We're going to say, hey, the Chinese can come in, at least with EVs, because we want to do more on decarbonization and have cheaper EVs. When that happens, though, that's a foot in the door. That is a major breach on the Western Front, that the United States automakers are really going to hate that because it is going to be at their doorstep. And, cars maybe can go over the border at some point. And I'm sure Canada is going to want to set up manufacturing plants in Canada. Yeah. Just like, Toyota and Honda and others do. And the Koreans have made plants in North America to build mass production cars. And they're doing that in many other countries. So maybe, there's an agreement on that with the Chinese because they have tariffs on canola and things that are just screwing up our farmers. So, and the farmers can understand, well, nobody wants EVs, so why don't we just do that? Well, you don't understand what it's going to do. It is going to hasten the demise of the current, big automakers, including Volkswagen, who are from Germany, but this is going to affect them too, because the United States is a big market for everyone. Even China would consider it a big market because they've got too many vehicles. They're too good at what they're doing. And the Chinese economy is not floundering, but it's slowing down a little bit. And they want to sell these vehicles and they're looking for markets to do it anywhere they can. And the Global South is benefiting from this right now, which is good because we need them to decarbonize, right? Yeah,
it's a tough situation and a very unique situation that all this is happening, in the midst of this transition to EVs. And these automakers, they're often considered too big to fail. So then you end up with possible government bailouts. I mean, is that what might happen in Germany? Like, it's hard to imagine.
Probably would.
Volkswagen going away.
I mean, the manufacturing of autos in Germany is even far more significant part of their GDP, the part of their economy than it is here. And that's why they're probably not too happy about it. But they're also backtracking. Yeah. They're also saying, the EV market is soft. Well, wait till the Chinese EVs get here and they become affordable for everyone. And the technology is so advanced. Well, we talked about the province where we live, the climate litigation here, but we haven't had any national litigation on climate in Canada. So this is kind of new that there's a new sort of Our Children's Trust, which we mentioned in the United States, is doing something in Canada now. Across Canada, the signs of a worsening climate crisis are impossible to miss. Wildfires, As I've said so many times, they're choking the skies, choking James. There's floods washing away homes and families struggling to rebuild. There's whole communities in our province that have had to rebuild, that are currently trying to rebuild. And it's really hard to build remote. I mean, you're trying to build a cottage at a lake while these people are up in the north, and it's really hard to get, builders to come up there, and really expensive to get everything in there. So now a group of young Canadians is taking the federal government in Canada to court, arguing that these disasters violate their charter rights to life, liberty, and security of the person. The case known as La Rose Viz v. His Majesty the King. It's King Charles. I guess that's what you do when you...
Shout out to Charles.
Shout out to Charles if you're listening, and you should be. I mean, what are you doing? Kinging? What do you got to do? Go for lunch with people? Listen to our podcast. You don't even have to drive yourself. This will mark the first federal climate trial in Canadian history. The youth behind it say Ottawa's failure to act decisively on climate change threatens their futures. I used to like Justin Trudeau for climate policy, but he's really aloof. The more I learn about him, this whole Katy Perry business is just going to show that his judgment is poor, okay? He's got poor judgment. But he did do more for climate, at least in laws his administration did, than other people. But I don't know. Maybe there would have been someone better. This week, West Coast Environmental Law joined with the United States-based nonprofit Our Children's Trust, which we talked about many times on the show, along with the Avray Finlay LLP and Tollefson Law Corporation to help bring the case to trial. Together, they aim to prove that Canada's government has a legal and moral, something I like to emphasize, duty to safeguard a stable climate system. The case reframes climate change as a constitutional issue, not just a political one. So advocates point to a landmark Dutch case where courts forced the Netherlands to cut emissions, inspiring stronger national targets. They hope Canada will follow suit. Well, good luck if a conservative government comes in, because they're not really having any policy on climate. They're all pro-oil. West Coast Environmental Law says youth-led advocacy is vital because today's young people will bear the worst impacts of a warming planet. No kidding. As one spokesperson put it, these youth refuse to respond to the climate crisis with hopelessness. They are demanding accountability. If successful, this could transform how climate change law is approached in Canada. It could change climate change policy, which we're all hopeful it will. And I'm very happy to see this case come forward. I've always been jealous and envious of these cases elsewhere.
Yeah, no, always love to see these kinds of lawsuits. Okay, from Electrek, a new startup has raised $8 million for pumped hydro in the ocean. So we've talked about pumped hydro before. Typically, this is a thing that exists in existing geographic locations, and you're essentially using water as a battery. If it's the daytime, you have plenty of clean energy like solar power. You pump.
Let me set this up.
Yeah.
Because this is something that people don't understand.
Yeah.
We've got regular people listening to the show who are not experts. And think of it like a little pond on the top of a mountain.
Yeah.
And I've seen these. There's a pipe with the water that comes down. And if you can pump it up with the extra solar you have in the daytime, the water comes back down and turns a generator at night.
Yeah.
Using gravity to force the water back down, they release the water when it's not. So that way, if you have extra solar, and there's a lot of extra solar in the world right now because there's so much solar, that when it's really sunny off a large, landscape and it's not too hot, a lot of that solar gets, sometimes can get wasted. So one way is to store it in batteries, and another way is pumped hydro. We don't have a lot of opportunity for pumped hydro because we live in a big, flat, nowhere land.
We live in the flattest place pretty much anywhere.
But under the ocean, that confuses me, Brian Stockton. How do they do it under the ocean?
Well, let me tell you. But we've talked about pumped hydro projects before. But usually it's an existing place. And it's a nice rabbit hole to go down on YouTube if you're interested in this sort of thing. These projects are often covered on YouTube, and it's fun to see how they work. But this one it's essentially a big bag that floats on the ocean, and then another bag, a bladder, that's on the bottom of the ocean. And you need a few hundred meters for this to work. And essentially it pumps the water from the bag at the bottom of the ocean and pumps it up to the bag at the top of the ocean. And they're
Okay.
using brine water, which is more dense. And I'm assuming the density of that, helps make all this work. So yeah, they're starting now a pilot project that's going to be 1/10 the size of what they're planning to do. And the idea being that, they're saying that this is potentially lower cost. Now, we just talked about that Tesla battery. Like, one of the great advantages of batteries, like talk about SMRs, like the promise of a small modular nuclear reactor is that in the future, they'll be built in a factory and you can pump them out quickly. Well, we already know that you can do that quickly with, solar and batteries. It's in 3 months, you can get a massive, battery storage thing set up. So the real advantage here is that there's no proprietary parts in this. This all uses fairly simple materials. So you end up with a very low cost. I would be worried about, the corrosiveness of seawater. But, I'm always fascinated by these types of projects. Like, everybody's always trying to invent a better mousetrap. It's like everybody, like back in medieval times, everyone had a scheme for a perpetual motion machine. Everybody thought that they could do something better. So, it's still at the pilot stage, so we don't know how well this is going to work, but deployment is pretty quick and simple and inexpensive if, this does actually work.
So I'm imagining this, I'm comparing it to gravity storage, which is kind of like a crane lifting weights up and stacking them with excess solar or whatever in the daytime. And then at night, you take the weights with the crane and you lower it. And when you lower it, it drives a generator that creates electricity. So I imagine that's what this is in a different form. It's filling a bladder, which gets heavier, goes to the bottom of the ocean, and pulls something that runs a turbine and then creates electricity from that. Yeah. Kind of like a big motor. Yeah. And then you run the cables to the ocean. You say a few hundred meters, which could be like a kilometer, I'm guessing, of pretty deep water.
But
500 meters.
But you need a few hundred, they say. You need at least a few hundred meters of depth for this to work. And they say it's 80% efficiency is what they're working with, which is not the best. But again, like if this turns out to be an inexpensive option, why not? So
efficiency, when they say 80% of efficiency, they're saying that you get back 80% of the solar that went into it, or whatever, the renewables that went into it.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at some of these other things where, battery efficiency is getting improved now too.
Yeah.
I was reading a story the other day about something that was, almost 100% efficient, which is unheard of in battery storage, because you have to convert it to AC to DC and all that, because the grid takes DC usually, unless you're transmitting it over large distances with a DC cable. But interesting stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Always interesting. We'll keep an eye on that. Okay. And another quick story here. We've talked about this before, nuclear plants that are being reopened because of the current demand for electricity. So Next Era Energy, this is from Power Magazine. Technology giant Google has signed a 25-year deal to buy power from Duane Arnold Nuclear Power Plant in Iowa. And this is a plant that was shut down back in 2020. It was damaged in a sustained wind event, which was something I was sort of surprised to hear. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
me too.
They ended up shutting it down because of this. But, the thing that these projects need is somebody like Google, who has now guaranteed to buy power for 25 years if they can get this thing running. So currently no guarantee that this is going to happen. But now that they have that agreement with Google in place, they can hopefully, raise the money to get this rolling.
A sustained wind event?
Yeah.
At a nuclear facility?
Yeah.
Like, wow. Where is it again? It's in Iowa.
It's in Iowa. Yeah. There's a name for that.
Home of tornadoes, yes, but not sustained hurricanes or anything like that. Does that mean you can't put a nuclear reactor in Jamaica, for example? I mean, I'm starting to wonder. I'm guessing, though, that they said that it's too expensive to fix. It's not worth it because, there's renewables are too cheap and it's not competitive anymore to invest in fixing it. But Google came along and said, how many hundreds of billions of dollars do you need? We've got an endless supply of money. Let's fix it and have 24/7 power for our data center that's non-emitting mostly.
Yeah. The weather event was called a derecho. That's what they call it. And it's a thing I'd never heard of, but I looked it up and it sounded like a sustained wind event.
Like a plow wind?
Yeah, like a plow wind or a shear wind or something like that, but it's called a derecho.
So we've had plenty of plow winds in thunderstorms on the North American plains here that aren't tornadoes, but they are a downdraft that is sustained. And one took down my tree, by the way, in my old house. That's the one that got on the Weather Network, the National Weather Channel. James had his tree on there, and people were talking about it for days when I walked down the street. Saw your tree. And I guess people watched the Weather Network back then.
Yeah.
I don't know. This was 20 years ago. Yeah, that was a sustained plow wind. That was just a cold front, though, but it was a sustained 100-kilometer or so wind, and down went my very old tree.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that happens, and it can be very powerful, but I didn't think it would affect.
Yeah.
I thought, nuclear power plants would be wind. That's something.
I mean, who knows? And, I imagine it was nearing the end of its sort of normal lifespan anyway, but, they're hoping to get it back up and running as early as 2029. So, this is never quick either, refurbishing a nuclear plant.
No, it's not, but probably a good thing because it's probably cheaper than building a new one. We love to hear from our listeners. That's our favorite thing. So feel free to contact us about anything that's on your mind. Or if you like to send in more information like we had this week that we weren't aware of, if you'd like to contact us about anything, please drop us an email at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And we always have that option of leaving us an online voicemail, which doesn't happen often, but is it a treat when it does. Speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow, where we get to hear your voice. Most people are too shy to leave their voice.
Yeah.
That's fine. I understand that, but it's kind of cool to hear our listeners because you're all just imaginary to us.
I love it.
Unless we get a letter from you, and to hear your voice makes it even more real.
So the Clean Energy Show is an independent podcast that is made possible by listeners like you who support us on Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergyshow, and support this podcast for as little as $1 a month. You get things like ad-free episodes, access to the Clean Energy Show Discord server, discounts at the merch store, early access to episodes, private updates, and verbal shoutouts on the audio podcast.
Coming up next is the lightning round. Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Despite promises of faster, cheaper builds, early SMR projects in China, Russia, and Argentina have suffered cost overruns of 300 to 700%. So, that doesn't mean it's always going to be that way with small modular nuclear reactors, but so far there are cost overruns, and we're trying to build one here. They're building one in Ontario. They're building 4 ultimately. And if they get to 200% cost overrun, that would be catastrophic. But 300% to 700%, and this is the risk that I worry about building early SMRs.
No, and we talked about that last week in Canada. And, often I'm really proud when Canada does something early, when we're the first to do something. You get that, national pride. But being the first to do SMRs may not be the best because you're going to possibly run into the most problems and the most cost overruns.
And, it's a timing thing. We have to decarbonize electricity generation in 10 years, less than 10 years, really, in order to have any hope of meeting climate targets and preventing the worst of climate change. So diddling around with, I don't want to call it experimental, but obviously they're going to run into cost overruns because if the first of anything will be like that. And yes, maybe this will set the stage for further nuclear in Canada and around the world. But cost overruns in China, Russia, and Argentina are very large right now. And that's not good. And China is usually pretty good at building nuclear. Maybe they should just be building the regular nuclear reactors. Sometimes I wonder, we know how to build those.
Yeah.
We need more expertise in building them, but, maybe the cost overruns aren't as high as percentage-wise anyway, at least if we keep doing it, but we're not. So 2 new official artificial intelligence AI data centers proposed for Edinburgh would demand the equivalent energy as much as building 5 cities. So this is, two new data centers, 5 cities worth of electricity in Edinburgh, which is nuts. If you make it clean, if you reconstitute an old nuclear reactor, maybe it'll work for you. I don't know. 1.3 million EVs sold last year in the United States. That's about 80 gigawatt hours worth of energy storage in the United States, just from what was sold there last year, and 16 gigawatts of residential load. So that's how much load if they all turned on at the same time, which we know they don't. Time for a CES Fast Fact. In 1950, Europe had about 12 million births versus 1.7 million births in Nigeria. And that has flipped in 2023. That relationship is completely reversed, with Nigeria recording more births each year than all of Europe, including Russia. Well, why do we include Russia and Europe combined? I don't want to. I don't want to include them in the world right now. Electrify America's real-time charger info is now on Google Maps. Yeah, I want to see that. Plug share is one thing, but as more people adopt EVs, you want to use the things that they're already using. They're already using Google Maps to navigate, and you want to be able to see what chargers are available, where they are, if they're working, if they're available, if they're busy, all that stuff. So that hopefully will expand to other, charger networks.
Yeah, I always use Google Maps to plan my trips, and it's always a bit awkward because it isn't the best for, looking for EV charging stops or whatever. So you always kind of end up having to use a couple of different things.
That's same here. There are nearly 23 gigawatts of thermal power plants offline in Texas, as they continue to have way above average heat for this time of year, which means air conditioning and load on the power grid. So 23 gigawatts is like 23, coal plants or 23 nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And thermal, when we say thermal, well, we usually mean, coal.
Burning stuff.
The big thermal and burning stuff, yes. And that is a lot to come offline. And you say, well, renewables are not reliable. But coal 24/7, no, those things have to go offline.
Yeah.
Natural gas plants have to go offline. They were offline in Texas during the big, February snowstorm there that had horrible outages that was deadly, and it was offline in Alberta. Two or three natural gas plants are offline for maintenance or broke. So these things are not 100%. When it's 40 below, you need them to be 100%, but they're not always. And then so you bring in power from other jurisdictions. Well, that's kind of how renewables work, fossil fuel heads. The New York City subway is nearly back to its ridership levels from right before the COVID-19 lockdown. The last time subway ridership was higher was March 1st, 2020, approximately episode 6 of the Clean Energy Show.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. People back in the subway.
It's working from home is better too.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a comment on that. But if you are going to go to work, take the subway.
Yeah. Well, a lot of places are, mostly fully back to working in the office. In Ontario right now, there's sort of legislation in place to get government employees in Ontario back into the office. A lot of people had shifted to working from home, but the current government doesn't care for that. So they are phasing it in where the Ontario government workers have to go back to the office. And this is rolling out over the next few months.
You know who's still working from home and loving it? Me.
Yeah.
I used to go to your house to do the show in the bomb shelter every week until the pandemic hit. And I'm still working remotely. And it's working very well. EPA Commissioner Lee Zeldin announced his agency is launching a major investigation into the right-wing conspiracies about chemtrails and weather manipulation to get to the bottom of it. So that's your U.S. government working for you, United States. The only state in the United States that has seen their electricity prices fall since 2019 is, guess for it, North Dakota, right below us. Over the same period, what happened in North Dakota, Brian? Wind generation up 34%. Are you listening, Saskatchewan, you morons? Solar generation is up 425%. Coal generation down 8%. Come on. This is what it's all about. But no, we live in backward times here. We live in the last century. North Dakota, you're doing the right thing. Starbus Solutions, the Israeli geoengineering startup led by a team of Israeli physicists, just raised $60 million to develop the technology to artificially cool the planet by reflecting sunlight away from the Earth by the 2030s. I mention that because these things are going on. I'm not saying I'm for them.
Yeah.
I take the advice of smart people, climate scientists who say this is a bad idea.
Yeah. It's hard to know. It seems very Mr. Burns-like.
And dangerous,
yeah.
perhaps. But that is what's going on, so I mention it. The next deployment of Tesla, the net deployment of Tesla superchargers during the last quarter almost reached an all-time high. So that's good to see that they're back up and running because we need them. We need them for EV adoption. We need them for convenience. A new poll finds 4 out of 10 U.S. adults are concerned about AI's environmental impacts. 4 out of 10. Hurricane Melissa has shattered the global record for the driest storm I ever observed. Surpassing Super Typhoon Merianti in 2016, the NHC is now warning that the eye wall's destructive winds may cause total structural failure, particularly in higher elevations, that is, cliffs, landslides, things like that. As you talked about earlier, China is reportedly going to regulate the naming of semi-solid-state batteries. Semi-solid-state batteries will be named solid-liquid batteries in China to prevent public confusion with solid-state batteries, according to a local media report in China. But usually the local media reports are correct, or you go to the somewhere bad. I don't know. But finally this week, the last coal-fired power plant in New England, the Merrimack station, has stopped running. With the closure of that facility, the region is poised to become the first region in the United States without a coal plant on its grid. Though New York State, which has its own regional grid operator, stopped burning coal way back in 2020, Granite Shore Power, the company that owns the coal plant in Bow, New Hampshire, said they ceased commercial operations September 12th, about a year and a half since they announced that they would retire the facility by 2028 as part of a settlement agreement with environmental groups.
Wow.
But now it's done early. So if you're into coal, big, beautiful coal, beautiful, clean burning coal, chances are the government rhetoric doesn't match the reality of economics. And sometimes economics, physics, things like that come to bite you in the butt.
And on that news, that is our show for this week. Once again, you can contact us, Clean Energy Pod, on social media, patreon.com/cleanenergypod, and the email cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button on your podcast app, and you'll get new episodes every week.
And remember to join our Patreon if you can. And thanks to our Patreon Executive Clean Club members, Green Bastard and Brett Routley. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks for supporting our podcast.
See you next week.